Welcome, gamers, to Basement Arcade Pause Menu, the show where we hit pause, sit back, and just chill. I'm your host, Ben Magnet, and today on the show, I have a man who's looking at his Twitter and Instagram is probably the biggest Sega fan alive. You thought I was a Sega fan? Oh, no, 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 no. This gentleman here takes the cake. Welcome to the show, G to the next level. G, how are you, my guy?
Hey there, how's it going? Doing good. Doing good. How you doing today?
I am thankfully doing a lot better. If my voice sounds a little bit weird, it's because unfortunately I have been a little bit under the weather the past few days. But I'm here. I'm up. I got my wake up juice. I just took some Dayquil, and I also took a cough drop, some Ricola. So I should be okay for this recording.
Awesome. Well, I mean, hopefully all that kicks in. I got my wake up juice too. But I mean, any way for me to wake up and start the day, then talk about the Genesis.
Right? Exactly. And dude, before we start, I have to say I am so mad at myself because I saw you at Portland Retro Gaming Expo this past October. I was in line to meet Howard Scott Warshaw. I saw you talking to two gentlemen in the autograph booth, but I didn't know it was you. I had no idea. All I knew was I looked over, I see this gentleman sitting at a table talking to two other people, and you were wearing one of the coolest Sonic tie-dye shirts I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, I want to say something, but you were talking to some people. I was like, I don't want to be rude, so I'm just gonna stay in line. And then the line snaked up forward, and then you left, and I was like, oh, okay. And then here comes your pictures on Twitter and on Instagram. It's like I'm just looking at my social media feed. I'm like, son of a bitch, that was him. Damn it.
I should be there this year. I don't know yet, but I should be there this year. So I gotta come see me.
Hopefully I'll be there this year. Last year was a bit of a fluke, and it was very lucky. I was very lucky to go. But G, before we get started, every time I have a brand new guest on the show, I always ask them, how did they get into video games? And with you specifically, that question is going to be a little bit twisted because I want to know how or why Sega.
Well, so two-part question then, really. How did I get into video games? So, first off, I started playing the arcades with my dad. Because my mom and my dad used to have a bowling league, or they used to be part of a bowling league, and they would bring me with me and my sister. They would bring both of us with them to their bowling night, and in that bowling alley there was an arcade. And inside the arcade, you got your staples, you had like your Pac-Mans, you had all that good stuff. But then I don't know if maybe it was a contractual reason or maybe the owner just really liked Sega, but they had literally like every Sega arcade game possible. So they had like Altered Beast, they had Outrun, they had Space Harrier, even though I never touched Space Harrier, which is weird. But I got a chance to play all of Golden Axe. I got a chance to play like all of those arcade games with my dad. And that's basically how we kind of got exposed to that. They also had we got a chance to try out like a Play Choice 10 and a few other things later on. So I think it was really between that first point of playing those arcade games with my dad, walking into that Pizza Hut with the Play Choice 10, then going home with an NES, like a little bit later on. Granted, we had an Atari before that, but the Atari was more for him than it was for me. Let's be honest. But the NES, though, I mean, I got into that a lot later. But then that's what really everything started getting started. But what really peaked with Sega for me, and I'm sure a lot of people share the same sentiment, because I knew about those other games, but they didn't all peak Sega to me until later on. But it was a certain Blue Hedgehog that came around. So it was really when Sonic came around in 1991, and he just hit on all the right levels for me. Like, I wanted this game in my life so bad. And so, yeah, it was that year of 1991, Christmas 1991, where my dad got a Genesis, Sonic, Outrun, Altered Beast, and Arnold Palmer's Tournament Golf, because he was a golfer. So we got all four of those games, but I was playing Sonic most of that time, so like the wee hours of the day. And then it's just been, for some reason, like there's always been something about Sega, even now, like even in today's, like there's always been something about Sega that's appealed to me, like more than anything else. They always did something different. They always did something against the grain. Like they were the rebels. They were the ones that challenged, the dare to be different. And I think that's one of the reasons why Sega just stuck hard with me, because that's something that I kind of hold in my creed as well. So, but yeah, and ever since, it's the Genesis, Mega Drive, depending on where you're at. Like it's my favorite console of all time.
That's awesome. And just to hear that Sonic the Hedgehog was your entry into, or not your entry, but the reasons you stayed with Sega, to me, that was the reason why I fell in love with video games. It was this little audio listeners. I'm wearing one of my Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirts, and this little blue hedgehog, I can blame for so many things.
You and me
He's the
both.
he's the reason I got into video games. He's the reason I got into comic books, and I'm trying to remember I keep telling myself I've told the story a million times before, but Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I want to say was the very first video game I've ever played, but was never the first Sonic game I ever owned. The first Sonic game I owned was Sonic CD because
Ooh.
one day, I want to say in 1995, 1996, my dad comes home with a Windows 95 computer, and on that computer, there's a demo of Sonic CD. And he tells me is that when they went to the place to
Oh.
get their computer, they didn't have the game available, but he was going to buy the game for me the very next day. True to his word, he comes home with Sonic CD, and I play that sucker to near death.
Well, that's awesome. I hardly hear anybody say that their first entry to Sonic was on the PC. Like that's a
Yeah,
first for me. That's awesome.
yeah. My parents weren't anti-video games, but they weren't anti-video games, but they were very much like they wanted me and my brother to go outside. I mean, it was early 90s. They were like, video games are fun for a little while, but we want you to go outside and play. Go
Yep.
get some sunshine, get some vitamin, touch grass, kids. They were
Yep.
telling us to touch grass before touch grass was even a phrase.
Right.
And
It's like go get in the mud. That's
yeah,
what my parents were like.
pretty much, yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, like Sega Sonic CD on my favorite game, and then the Sonic Knuckles collection came out, so my parents bought me that and Sonic R, all on the PC. I wouldn't own a proper Sega Genesis until my beautiful girlfriend got it for me for our first anniversary, but it was the At Games
Mhm.
plug and play.
Oh.
In our defense,
I was like, and I was like, oh.
in our defense, it was 2015. The mini hadn't come out yet.
Hey, I always say that to a lot of people. It's like people dog the at games products, and they're fine little things. It's just gotta understand there are some differences, but for most people, it does the job and it's fine. And if they're still
Well,
having a good time, then I'm not gonna begrudge you for having a
at the
good
same
time.
time,
That's all there's to
we
it.
did. At the same time, we didn't really know. We just
Yeah,
saw that.
yeah,
We
exactly.
just saw it at Target. I thought it was cool. She knew I was a huge Sonic the Hedgehog nerd. It had a bunch of it has a few Sonic games on it. She knew I love Sega Genesis. And when I got it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. It wasn't until I plugged it into the TV and I started playing it that I realized, like, yo, this actually sucks. Like when I
Yeah.
first, like Green Hill Zone, the sound was so different. The sound was just so out of whack. And I'm sitting there like, this just doesn't feel right. I mean, then after I was talking to her about it, she's like, did I give you a bad thing? I'm like, it's okay, honey. We didn't know. We
Hey,
had no idea.
exactly. It was the thought that counts. She knew that you were into Sega.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, y'all didn't know. Well, granted, little did you know, I'm actually kind of working, if you don't mind me speaking a little tiny bit, it's like I'm actually kind of working on something small for my YouTube channel a little bit later on. Did you know At Games actually did release one Sega product that actually is kind of cool? There's
Ooh.
one, and I'll get to it once I do the video, but there's one specific At Games product, and a lot of people don't know about it, but it's actually kind of cool. But yeah, but hey, well, going back to that though, it's really the thought that counts. My wife is huge into video gaming too. We met in an arcade, so it's like she's huge into gaming too. She's always looking at little things like either Sega or Sonic or something that kind of it's a pepper in my life. The same thing with me and Pokemon. So that's a really sweet. I mean, for me and her with Pokemon, I mean, so it's like 'cause she loves Pokemon. So
You are the second person on the show who told me they met their significant other in an arcade.
nice.
Yeah, I mean, my a past guest and friend of the show, Dearest Abby, she met her husband in an arcade.
Well, you know Dear Savvy? I know Dear Savvy.
Yeah.
She's a local friend of mine. Heck yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dearest Abby was on my show a while ago. Yeah.
She's wonderful.
She's not your wife, is she?
No.
Oh. I was about to say, I was like, wait a minute. Did I just do something here?
That would have been funny, but like, hey, do you know Ranjan does things? I'm like, yeah, that's my wife. That would be too funny. But no, Abby's a sweetheart. And she's awesome.
Yeah, Dearest Abby was on the show, and when she told me that story, I was like, that lucky bastard. So both of you, that's awesome. I love hearing stories like that. But yeah, so for me growing up, I was a huge Sega kid just because Sonic was on Sega. I was very much in the camp of wherever Sonic goes, I was like a blind follower of Sonic the Hedgehog. And I didn't really get into any other Sega games because I wouldn't say no other Sega game interests me. No other Sega game really captured my interest as Sonic the Hedgehog did. So, and as I got older, I really wanted to get into other Genesis games because obviously the Super Nintendo is like it's up like the Genesis and Super Nintendo. They're up there in the echelon of '90s video games. Obviously, the console wars is one of my favorite eras of video game history to study. But the topic of today's show, G, is Genesis hidden gems. Essentially, the some of the greatest Genesis games that are out there that are not Sonic the Hedgehog. As much as could talk about Sonic the Hedgehog all day, every day, I want to dive right into talking about some of the greatest Sega Genesis games that are not Sonic. And you being the biggest Genesis guy that I know, and audio listeners, you can't see it, but his backdrop is a beautiful collection of Sega Genesis games, in-box Genesis games. I am just not jealous, but I'm just like, so that's what heaven looks like. Okay.
Yeah, there's some days like when I do, because I'll do my work in the other room and the Genesis wall's up there, and I just look at it and I'm just like, I feel my heart flutter. And like every now and then I look at it, but yeah, it's awesome. Like I said, it's my favorite system of all time. So yeah.
So, all right. So G, what are some no number there's no numbers in this one, but just let's just like random fire, because as of right now, the one Sega Genesis game that I am really deep into that I'm thankful to play thanks to my Genesis Mini 2 is Crusader of Senti.
Ooh.
Oh,
Right.
oh, that was I was not expecting that reaction. You have some thoughts on Crusader of Senti, apparently.
I do. So actually, I recently just streamed this on my Twitch channel. I finished it, and I actually going back and playing this game and finishing it, and just realizing how much better it is now playing it now than I did when I was a kid. Because I guess the whole thing didn't quite grasp me like as a kid. Crusader of Senti is incredible. I mean, and it's one of those games that's just like you could kind of tell that at the core when they first started, it's like you can tell it was kind of an idea of, hey, we want to make something that will give Sega fans, Genesis players, something equivalent to, say, The Legend of Zelda. I mean, it's obvious. You look at screenshots, you look at it, people are going to obviously compare it to The Legend of Zelda. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But at the same token, though, the game does so much on its own, including, I think probably the biggest thing about it is the ability to mix and match different special abilities with your animals, because you can talk to animals basically through the games. Like, because you can talk to animals, you get your different abilities along with being able to throw your sword. You combine the sword with the enemies, and you also can solve puzzles that way. But I think the biggest catch about that game is probably the story. Like, the story is a lot deeper and a lot more profound. I was trying to think of the right word. It's a lot more profound than a lot of people think it is, because it's one of those that plays on the fact that, hey, we're fighting up against these monsters, but who's really the monster here?
Yeah.
And it's like, are the monsters really the monsters? Are the humans really the monsters? Like, what's the deal here? And how it all unfolds towards the end. It's that perfect level of difficulty and challenge. It's not too hard. It's not too easy. The puzzles are easy to grasp. It looks great. It sounds wonderful. Like, the soundtrack is excellent. Like, this is a great game. It's just such a shame that, because Sega published it everywhere else in the world. Atlas published it in the US. And it's such a shame that this game came out so late in the life of the Genesis, and it had such a low print run that it's worth a lot today. And so when I saw, let me tell you, when the day that because I was following the Genesis Mini 2 since it was first announced, and I was just like, oh, what games are going to be on it? And then when they were trickling out each little bit, okay, these games are here, but they were all the Japanese one, because the American one wasn't announced yet. So like all these, like, so I'm under the assumption it's only going to be in Japan, because we didn't know yet. I was ready to import it and everything. And I saw these games like announced. And then on I think it was like the third or fourth announcement, the same day that they said, oh, it's coming to the United States. Oh, by the way, here are the rest of the games that are coming out for it. I was like, oh, okay. So I woke up that morning, and literally my wife is in the kitchen cooking right now. And there are two games that, like, I'm in the bedroom watching it on my phone. I just woke up and I saw the announcement. I'm watching it on my phone, and I saw Crusader Senti pop up. Well, hang on. Let me step back. I'm getting ahead of myself, because I saw that Ranger X made the list, which is one of my favorite games. We can absolutely talk about Ranger X. Okay. But when I saw that, I knew, because it's from the same company. I was like, oh, Ranger X made it? Oh, Crusader Senti's got to be on the list. It's like, oh, it's got to be on there. It's got to be on there. And then show up later on. There it was. I was like, boom, I knew it. Good, because this game, if you want to own this game legitimately, it's a lot of money. I mean, we're talking almost like 4 digits. It's a lot of money. So buy the Genesis Mini for like under $100 and get this game, and in a cavalcade of all kinds of other awesome ones, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
I love the Mini too.
I got
This-
very lucky with the Mini 2 because my best friend, or one of my best friends, he bought me my Genesis Mini when it first came out for Christmas. I was like a kid in the candy store when I opened that sucker up. I was like holding the box. He gave me the present. It was all wrapped up. I'm like, oh, I think I know what this is. I rip it open. I yell, Sega!
yeah.
I'm just because all I wanted because that year because my birthday's in November, then you have Christmas. Then all that year, I just kept telling my girlfriend, I was like, I just want the Genesis Mini. That's all I want. That's all I care about. Birthday comes around, didn't get it. Christmas comes around, she gives me something different. Awesome. We go to my best friend's house for Christmas. He gives me that.
Nice. There you go. Especially as mini ones. Mini ones are hard to get now. So that's good that you got it.
Yeah, I was just like, yay. And fast forward to the Genesis Mini 2. At first, I was actually against the Mini 2 because at the time, I didn't know that all the games were different. Like when they first announced it, I think I must have misread the marketing wrong because all I read was we are now adding 10 Sega CD games to the mix. And
okay.
Yeah.
So you thought it was the same, but they added extra games. That wasn't a completely different game list. Okay. So I thought it was going to be a completely different game list. Like when I first saw it, it's like, oh, it's got to be. And sure enough, yeah, there it was.
Yeah. At first, I was like, I mean, part of me really wants this because obviously there's a bunch of Sega CD titles that are, I mean, nowadays in today's day and age, a Sega CD is A, not only kind of hard to find, B, pretty expensive, but C, the games are also stupid expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just looking at the Sega CD games. I'm like, do I really want to spend this much money for a Mini 2? Part of me says yes. Maybe I could just sell my Mini 1, and I'm just trying to rationalize it. And then I say, oh yeah, all these games, like only 2 technically crossed over from the Mini 1 to the Mini 2, being Space Harrier 2 and Super Fantasy Island, I think.
Well, no, those are different. Super Fantasy Zone and Fantasy Zone are different.
That's it.
But Space Harrier is like a slightly upgraded version of Space Harrier. Well, not slightly, actually. It's a lot of differences between Space Harrier 2 because M2 went up and completely cleaned it up. So it's almost like a new game, really.
Oh.
Like if you think about it. And then it's cool about how they enhanced the Space Harrier 2. It actually plays cleaner and looks smoother than the actual Space Harrier Complete on the 32X, which is odd. So yeah, no. There's also so have you played Space Harrier on your Genesis Mini?
I have not. I have not.
Go look at it. There's a hidden bonus. I won't spoil it for you, but there's a little hidden bonus there that a lot of people missed. There's a bonus game.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah, so check it out. Check it out. It's there.
Well, once again, looking at the Genesis Mini 2, when I saw the list, I was like seeing all these new games. All these brand new games that were not on the Genesis Mini 1. I was like, oh, it's an entirely different game list? Oh, hell yeah, I want this. And then I saw what you had to do. I was like, dang it. And I put on my Amazon wish list thing, and I want to buy it, and I'm probably never going to get it. He came through with me again, Christmas I'm like holding this box. I'm like, this is interesting. I rip it open. I'm like, how did you get this? I'm like, out of all the presents I got for Christmas that year, the Genesis Mini 2 was the one that freaked me out the most because I did not know I was going to get that at all. I was thinking that I had to find it myself, and it was way into December, so I thought it was not past the date, because if you go on Amazon now, it's trying to find one is a little bit difficult. You have to go through third-party sellers.
Right.
But man, I was just so happy when I got that because, like you said, and Crusader Senti was on it. I knew about that game thanks to the video game historian, and I saw his video and I was like, hey, this looks like a really fun game to play. Hopefully it comes up on the Genesis NSO someday. Hopefully some collection will have it. And here it is on the Mini 2. So I'm like, yay.
I bet you, because I have a theory going on to the Mini 2. It's like, I have a theory, because if you look at all the games that have been announced, because I have the expansion pack for Switch Online as well. And if you look at all the games that basically got announced on it, only 2 of those games that have shown up on Nintendo Switch Online have not been on any iteration of the Mini or the Mini 2, whether it be like American, Japan, Asian. They've appeared on one of those versions somewhere, Zero Wing and Thunder Force 2. Everything else has appeared on the Mini in some capacity. Well, now that Ristar was on the Mini 2. So like all of them have been. Which is on the Japanese one.
Oh,
it's on the Japanese Mini one. Yep.
Never mind.
Yep. Same thing with Alien Soldier. Alien Soldier is on the Asian Mini one.
Okay.
So in some capacity, some like M2's behind this.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised to see Crusader Senti. I hope it makes it to Switch Online. Get this game in the hands of more people.
Yeah,
Like, because seriously, if you have a means of being able to play it, it's wonderful. It's not too long either. It's like it's roughly about what 6 hours, 6 7 hours. So it's not too
uh,
terribly long.
no, it's. I
So
mean,
yeah.
I'm not super deep into Crusader Senti, but I'm having an absolute banger of a time playing it. I just need to
Mhm.
get back. It's just one of those things where you're an adult as well. You're like me. You have a full time job. We have all this other side projects going on. So
Oh,
finding
yep.
time just to sit down and play video games and just enjoy it is just like
Yep.
precious.
Yep. We wear many hats. Especially here in 2023, you have to be wearing many hats in order to survive, really.
Yes, yes,
So
you do.
true that.
Yes, you do. So moving on from Crusader Senti for a hot second, G just hit me with those recommendations. What are some hidden gems? Because you told me before we were started recording that you have a stack of games, and I
I
want to go through them.
do. I
I
grabbed
am
I grabbed a stack of 5 of my personal favorites that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about. You can't get these on the Genesis Mini. You can't find these on anything else. Well, one of these games is available on one other compilation, which I'll get to that. But I'm going to tell you probably what I feel is my favorites. I'll just start off hot. Like my
uh-huh.
favorite Genesis game, one of my
Mhm.
favorite games of all time. And I feel like it's a side scroller that nobody on this earth talks about. And I think it's wonderful. Have you ever heard of this one before? El Viento by Renovation.
I have not.
You've not. This game is incredible. So let me put a synopsis in it. All right. It's a side
Okay.
scroller where you play as a Peruvian sorceress who's found by a treasure hunter. And now she has to save the world. It's set in
Okay.
1930s New York. So it's set in 1930s New York, where you're a Peruvian sorceress who have to save the world from an ancient god being resurrected. While at the same time, you have to fight Al Capone and his
Oh.
mobsters, and you have to fend off Cthulhu while riding dolphins. You go to the oh my goodness, you go to Mount Rushmore. You travel to New York City. You do have to. I'll go ahead and say it. You do have to travel up a certain tower and fight, and a few other things. But just this game is just so. It's not the best game out there. There are some things that might frustrate a couple of others. The graphics and the animation are unique beyond anything else. There are explosions that just take up the entire screen. There's a giant, the Cthulhu fight that I talk about. He takes up the
Uh-huh.
entire screen. And some
Oh
people will look
wow.
at it as like, oh, wow, this is like, what is this? But I'm like, no, I assure you, it's as wild as I'm saying it is. Play it. It's now, this is also another one that's very tricky to get because this one
Uh-huh.
was never released in Europe. So it's only released in America and Japan.
Oh.
It is also available on the Evercade. So, like, if you have an
Okay.
Evercade, there's a compilation that has this game on it. But seriously, this game it has, and it, also going back to the style of it too, because a lot of the Wolf Team, the team that made this game, Wolf Team, who now makes the Namco Tales of games,
Mhm.
they made this game. They made a bunch of games on Sega and PC Engine and a few other consoles. It's so colorful and vibrant. The whole anime vibe. It definitely has like a 1990s anime vibe and feel to it. But this game it's awesome. It is just wonderful.
The way you described to me how you're Peruvian sorceress, I mean, and what do you know what year this game came out?
It came out in 1992, I think. No, 91. Sorry, this one came
91?
out in 91. Yep.
Nice. I mean, already you're playing as a female protagonist, pretty progressive for the time, if I do say so
Yes.
myself. But
Yep.
everything else you said, how you fight Al Capone, you fight Cthulhu, you go to Mount Rushmore, you do all this stuff. It's like this sounds like a fever dream, but
It
a
does.
really cool fever dream.
Oh, if you actually see it in action, then what you just said will probably ring true. You'll probably be like, "What were they doing when they made this?" But it just winds up being just wild. Now, I should have professed one thing. Al Capone they changed his name for the American release. For the American release, his name is Vincent DeMarco. I guess for obvious reasons. They were like, "Oh, you don't want to actually be fighting Al Capone, but you're really fighting Al Capone."
Yeah,
But yeah, no,
it's
it's so good.
it's like when anime calls it Whackdonald's instead of McDonald's.
Right. Right.
It's
You
like
know when you get those games that like even you don't care about what time it is, you don't care about what else you've got things going on in your life, that once you start playing you're just like, oh, I can't just play like 1 or 2 levels, I have to finish it. This is
mhm.
one of those games I just like, once I start playing it I have to finish it, like no matter what. And I love it, and I've beaten it probably more times than, except for maybe like Streets of Rage 2. I think I've probably beaten that game more times than any game in my Genesis collection.
Ooh, okay.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, LV Intel, I have to keep an eye. If I ever own, because right now the only Genesis consoles I own are my minis and of course the NSO and this little ditty right here for my Nintendo Switch. But if
Mhm.
I ever own like an actual Genesis, I'll try to keep an eye out for that one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, that or the Evercade, because at least you can get it for much cheaper. Because if you're trying to get a copy of this one now, I'm not sure what the value is going on it right now, but it's a pricey one, unfortunately.
Okay.
But
All right.
it's wonderful.
Well, also the Evercade is a console that I've been wanting because just looking at that sucker, I was like, this looks actually really cool, and also I just love how they have cartridges for it.
Oh yeah, I have the Evercade Versus, and I just got the EXP, the new portable console. I just got it about a month ago, and it's
Ooh,
nice.
nice.
It's nice. So. And of course I bought that renovation collection that has El Viento on it. Of course I did. So but yeah.
All right. Hit me with another one. Let's see what you got.
Okay. All right. So the next one I grabbed this one here, Subterranea. So this is another one. Sega published this one, and so what it is that you're in a tiny ship that you're underground in caverns, and you have to rescue the I think they're miners, either they're miners or they're researchers or something like that. You have to find the researchers, you have to find the part of the ship, and then escape without dying or beat the boss. And it's all done in like a kind of, it's not a top-down perspective, it's like a vertical perspective. You look at it and you think it's a shooter, like, you know, like a standard kind of spaceship shooter thing. It's not, because you have to travel through, it's not non-linear, but you do have to figure out like where in the stages to find those parts, to find the people. But the way that it's done is like you also have to manage your fuel, you have to manage some of your weapons, gravity. You have, because you're constantly sinking. So you have to catch gravity like as you're going to use it to your advantage. That way you're conserving your fuel. So it sounds like a lot of micromanagement, and it does take a couple of times to get used to it. But once you get used to the controls, you get used to how it feels. This game, it's very challenging, very challenging. I've never actually beaten this game. This is one of those ones that like I've been wanting to try to get it, but it gets really tough later on. But it is one of those, like, just one more go, because it's one of those that, like, it feels daunting at first, but then once you catch it, it grips you. It grips you really toughly. And then the game looks great. The music, which was done by Jesper Kid. Jesper Kid did the soundtrack for this one. And this is another one I'm like, Sega put it out. I remember playing it when I was younger, and it didn't quite catch me. But I remember, like, Sega didn't promote this game at all. Like, they just kind of silently dropped it. And when I rented it back in the day, I was like, this is cool. But this is also one of those ones, like, so I said I had a sister, right? So my sister gamed, but she didn't game nearly as much as I did. But she latched onto this game a lot more than I did. And so when she actually taught me how to play it, and so when I figured it out, like, oh, this is great. Like, this is a really, really great one. So if you want something, again, going back to the whole, hey, doing something different, going against the grain, there's no other game on the Super NES or the Genesis that plays like this. This is very unique.
That is extremely interesting, because when you first started talking about it, I was like, oh, okay, so it's just another shmup. Not that shmups are bad. I mean, the Genesis is home to a lot of great shooters. I mean, Musha is one that I was really excited to play when I came out on the Genesis NSO. Zero Wing. I mean, I was happy about Zero Wing because of that's the origin of the famous "All Your Base Are Belong to Us" meme.
The origin of memes, arguably, if you really think about it. Sega created meme culture.
Yes, it did. I'm okay with that. So I mean, and also a very good shooter, if I do say so myself. Excuse me. But the fact that you have to manage your weapons, you have to manage your fuel, because a lot of times with like a lot of shooters like Gradius or Xevious or even Musha, you just go one direction and just shoot, shoot, dodge, you dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, essentially. And that's just hearing all that, I was like, that is very interesting. How it's not just you go, you shoot, you blow stuff up, but you have to find people, you have to find these researchers, these miners, and all the stuff that you were mentioning. I was like, that is interesting, because I don't know of any other game where you had to be careful of your fuel. You had to be careful. You had to use gravity to your advantage, and the fact that you're sinking instead of going up, I'm just like, that is a very interesting game. And even I could see why it didn't latch on to you at first, because I can't tell you how many times when I was a kid playing certain video games, I just did one thing and then I got stuck and I couldn't understand why I was stuck. I.e., steamrolling everyone with my starter in Pokemon and not being able to get past a certain gym leader or member of the Elite Four, because, you know, they keep punching my starter to bits and all the rest of my team absolutely sucked. So
what you just figuring that out, right? And then there's also like pathways that you could take. There are travels, like there's fast tracks that you can use that don't use fuel, but then you also have to watch out because if the enemies knock you off, then you got to figure out your way back around. And yeah, it's a little bit, it's a good case of like risk versus reward. That again, nothing else plays like this, and it's fantastic.
And you mentioned how you have two ways of being a game, which is either escape or beat the boss. I think that's actually very innovative because I don't know what year this game came out, but does it say on the box?
It does. 1994. So this one was 1994.
Yeah, because a lot of games back then, like what 93, 94, it was just like you go to the last bit of the game, you have to beat the boss. They don't give you an extra avenue, as far as I can tell, or at least there might be other games, but they they're probably not more famous games. Not to say that this isn't a famous game, but lesser known games. That's the phrase I was looking for.
Yeah.
That don't necessarily do that. And the fact that this does do that, I think that's actually pretty innovative. One thing I always have to applaud Sega for was their innovation, their willingness to push the envelope. Granted, that's what put them in the ground eventually, or almost put them in the ground, especially in the console department.
Right.
But the fact that their games were, even their video games, were still trying to let's push the envelope. Let's just not make it run to the right, jump on some enemies, and then you have a boss and you rinse repeat for X amount of levels. With this and the previous game, El Viento, it's like, no, let's change it up a little bit. Let's make this a little bit different.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so that was Subterranea. What's the next one?
All right, next one. So going back to Sonic. It's like going back to Sonic and just like how the mascot platformer, the age of which one of my favorite types of games, like any type, like I love like whether it be side scrolling, 3D or however, like I love mascot platformers dearly. And it's mostly, I mean, Mario lit the match and then like Sonic threw the fuel on the fire. Basically, that's essentially what it was. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Mario, but so whenever you see other like mascot games that come around, you're just like, oh, it's a Sonic clone, and you might not want to give it a shot, right? This is one, however, that you absolutely need to give a shot. This is High Seas Havoc. So this is High Seas Havoc. It's done by Data East, and this is another one that I completely missed when I was growing up. And the funny thing is that you look at it, it's like, okay, so you're a pirate seal. Okay, that's cute. And you kind of look at it and just you want to palm it off like that, but no. So High Seas Havoc does things a little bit differently. It's like, yes, at the end of the day, you do just have to get all the way from point A to point B. But the way that the level design and the way that the enemies are, everything has just so the cartooniness and the aspect and the style and just everything just feels so good. You know, like when you're playing a platformer and the controls just feel right. Like everything just feels just right, spot on. Like the jumping mechanism, the platforming just feels right. The level design just feels right. The boss fights are just a ton of fun and the graphics are beautiful. Like this is an absolutely beautiful game that just something that just completely misses out now. You do jump on your enemies. You do also have like, and it's weird because like he has kind of a flash. So Captain Lang is his name. He kind of has a flash kick, which makes you think, oh, what, like Street Fighter? Like, yeah, kind of like Street Fighter actually. But this is just one that like it might not on paper, it might not sound like a whole lot. But once you actually play it and just you can tell that there was a lot of love that was put into this game. You could tell that there was a lot of heart and it really shows. Again, graphics are beautiful. Soundtrack is outstanding. The game does get very tough. There's one stage that once you get towards like getting close to the final boss, you have to watch out for, you're on the pirate ship and you have to watch out for these flying boxes. So it's one of those that the more that you play around with it, and you do get unlimited continues. So that's something to think about too. I do like that. So that's something that I feel was missed back in those days a lot. You get unlimited continues. Yeah, unlike a certain game for the Genesis that everyone keeps talking about, Lion King. Yeah. Are we eye to eye on Lion King here? Have I found somebody who's eye to eye on the Lion King here? I don't like the Lion King. Okay, so full disclaimer, I've never played the Lion King on a SEGA Genesis. I just know about it through reputation alone. Part of me wants to get the collection that came out, you know, the one that comes with the Lion King, Aladdin, Jungle Book, those classic games. But at the same time, I don't want to play it because The Lion King is my favorite Disney animated film of all time. That is the game I latched on. I absolutely adore that film. I don't want to get to I Just Can't Wait to Be King, which growing up, it was my favorite song. Not anymore. Let's be prepared because Scar is awesome. Yes. I don't want that level. Yes, the way they did the 16-bit, sorry, quick side tangent. The way they did the 16-bit music in that game, awesome. It sounds great. Like,
the music is fantastic, but I don't want it burned into my eardrums that every time I hear do 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 do, when I hear the opening
Frustration,
bit, yeah, I don't want to be like, you know,
right?
especially if I
Well,
go to Disneyland and I hear that song, I'm just gonna be like and run away. So,
what if I told you that there's another stage in there that's even more frustrating than that one?
oh
It gets
no,
worse. Like I
oh,
played when you get to Hakuna Matata, have fun. Like,
oh
oh no.
no,
It's like you eventually figure out the Lion King. Like you eventually figure out your way through it, but then just realizing like, and I know we're probably going to break some hearts talking about it. Trust me, I've had people get legit angry at me when I talk about my thoughts about the Lion King. They're just
uh-huh,
opinions, right?
yeah,
But my thing is just that the level design on it is just way too disjointed to be fun, like in any capacity. Poor
hmm,
Simba doesn't have like any range, and the hit detection is kind of off. Now, granted, I don't know. I've never played the Super Nintendo version, so I don't know if the Super NES version is any better. I'm just going off the Genesis one,
right,
and it's. I mean, I don't want to dog on it too much, but it's just too frustrating to be fun. I mean, that's.
yeah,
However, I still think if you're wondering about that collection, I still think you should get it. Like to me, like
okay,
it's worth it for everything else that you get in that package. I
yeah.
mean, being able to get Aladdin Genesis and Aladdin Super NES, the Jungle Book is underrated. Personally, I found like the Jungle Book game is great. Like nobody talks about it. It's like
Okay.
I think it's great, but
Oh,
other than that, yeah, it's worth it for the package. The funny thing is that I got it for Christmas a couple of years ago, the physical release, the
uh-huh.
original physical release on it. But then you could pay $10 and get the DLC update, which adds Aladdin and then adds the Jungle Book, Aladdin Super NES, and adds the Jungle Book and everything else to it. And now I'm like, okay, now we got something.
Yeah,
Like
because
now we have
didn't
something here.
Aladdin yeah, because Aladdin Super Nintendo was made by Capcom, right? It wasn't made by
Correct.
Virgin? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're completely different.
Yeah.
They're completely different games. And here's kind of a and here's kind of a surprising take for a lot of people. I actually prefer the Super NES Aladdin. Like I do. The Genesis version is
I
beautiful. Don't get me wrong, and it's a great game. But the Super NES one is just crafted so well.
I've
But
actually
it
heard
had an
that.
unfair advantage, though. I mean, you got to
Mhm.
think about it this way because Capcom had a longer time to develop it and all that good stuff, whereas Sega was under literally like a 3 month time crunch.
Yeah.
So it's like so. I applaud Virgin Games and Disney for what they did do with Aladdin. Oh, and by the way, if you get the update actually they've cleaned up a lot of stuff
Ooh.
about the Aladdin on Genesis. It plays a lot better now. They
Ooh.
really did a great job with it.
That is good to hear. Because I've been curious, because like I said before, I've never played The Lion King on Sega Genesis. I only know that game through reputation. I've read
Mhm.
about it. I like when people were talking about, oh, it's rumored that the devs made it harder, so you have to buy the game instead of rent it. I'm like, no, that's true. The devs
Well, that's
admitted
yeah.
it.
As was the case with a lot of games in that generation.
Yeah, yeah,
Or they'll just
because
like remove continues outright. Crown Conquest. They'll just take continues out like completely, which is unfortunate. I'm like,
mhm.
yeah, oh well. But I mean, but the Lion King is really. I mean, is it an awful game? No, it's just really frustrating. Well,
It's
granted, I
dark.
probably should give it a chance with the new collection because
Yeah.
I know they made some changes, so I should probably give it another chance. But just going off my original feelings on it, I'm with you. I'm
Okay.
with you on it.
I mean, I would like to play the game someday, but unfortunately, it's not super high on my must play list. But now that because I have seen a physical version with Lion King, Aladdin, and Jungle Book all in one package physical, if I see it for sale or I see it as decent price, I'll probably go ahead and pick it up because I do want to
Mhm.
experience the game. I do want to, and also the fact that that collection may also have the Aladdin game for Super Nintendo because I have heard the same thing you said that Super Nintendo Aladdin is a lot better than the Genesis game. Great,
Play them
honestly,
both.
yeah,
Play them
play them
both.
both.
But I prefer the Super NES one.
All right. Yeah, because what was I going to say? Because all I know about this about Aladdin Genesis between Super Nintendo is that Genesis he's carrying a sword the whole time, where Super
Mhm.
Nintendo you have to chuck apples at enemies to beat them up.
Yep. Yep. It's a lot more acrobatic. It's a lot more platforming focused. That's
Oh, okay.
probably why I prefer it actually. Because like it's a lot more platforming purpose. You have to evade your enemies. You have to think a little bit
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say smarter, but you have to kind of figure out other ways to get around your enemies as opposed to
Okay.
just going up and like swashbuckling, which something to be said. The swashbuckling is really satisfying in Aladdin Genesis. It is.
Hmm.
But man, the Super NES one is just. However, can I throw a little asterisk on the side too, real
Yeah, go
quick,
for it.
and not to go too far off tangents. If you have a moment, play the Master System Aladdin.
They made a Master System version of it?
Yes, the Master System version is based off the Game Gear version because there was one that was released in America that Sega put out for Game Gear. In Europe, it was released on Master System, and it's completely different. It's kind of a side-scrolling auto runner. Like if you think about like those auto
Oh.
runner kind of games. Now, not all of it. There are some more open side-scrolling portions on it too. The Master System version is fantastic and it's beautiful. Arguably, probably the best looking game on the system.
Wow.
Like the graphics are awesome. It's got the music from the film. It's a lot of fun. Seriously, check it out. If you can get your hands on it and try it. The Master System one is very underrated. Nobody talks about it, and I think it's fantastic.
I mean, outside of some other Sega systems besides the Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast, another system that needs more love in today's day and age, especially from Sega, I would argue is the Master System.
Master System.
Because, geez, when I found out the Master System existed, I was like, you mean they're telling me that Sega did 8-bit games before the Genesis?
Yep.
Because I was young, I wasn't in tune with video games that I am now. If you asked me what was Sega's first ever console, I would have said the Sega Genesis. I would never have said Master System or even the system before that, which was the SG-1000 or whatever it was called.
Now, it's mainly because Nintendo had such a huge stranglehold of the market, like back in those days. Like Sega, and even because don't forget, Atari had an 8-bit system too, the 7800. Like neither one of them like could even come close to competing on a marketing level. They couldn't compete on basically like getting into stores level unless you lived in Europe or Brazil. Like there's a good chance, even in Japan, the Master System suffered, right? Yeah. So Sega, the thing is that Sega always kind of struggled from like their native country until the Saturn. The Saturn was kind of their breakthrough in Japan. Even the Genesis did way better outside of Japan. The Master System did way better outside of Japan. But the Master System especially is that when people look at it and you look at the American library, it's like, oh, that's not a whole lot. But then when you look at the global library of the Master System, it's like your eyes just open wide, like what? Really? There's an officially licensed Street Fighter 2 on the Master System. It's like, but only in Brazil. It's not very good, but at least they tried. It's officially licensed Mortal Kombat 3. They tried. Like, it's there. They basically tried to make it work. But then, like, say Disney, perfect example. There's so many great Disney games that are on there between Aladdin. There's 2 Donald Duck games that are both fantastic. There's 3 Mickey Mouse games. There's a Castle Evolution for Master System that's different than the Genesis version. Played them both. Like there's Land of Illusion, Legend of Illusion. They're just wonderful, wonderful games that but the Master System absolutely needs more love, especially in today's age. I'd buy a Master System Mini. We'd probably be like, it probably wouldn't sell well at all. Nope. But I'd buy it if they made it.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm right there with you, especially because when I first played a Master System game, I was at a video game convention in the before the pandemic hit. They had Sonic the Hedgehog in the Master System. And I'm like, and I'm just sitting there going like, this is just so different.
I love Sonic 1 on a Master System. To me, I actually love it more than the Genesis one. As an adult, actually, yeah, I know it's strong thoughts, but like if you play it, you will understand just how good it is. And especially with like Yuzo Koshiro's soundtrack. It's like excellent boss fights, but again, going to Sonic on the Master System, all the Sonic games on the Master System are completely different. Granted, you can get them on Game Gear too, but it's not the same.
Yeah,
Mike, it's not quite the same. Having that entire field of view and being able to see what you're doing is a huge difference for you. But yeah, no, Master System needs more love.
It does. It definitely does. But going back to High Seas Havoc, when you said it was made by Data East, I was instantly thinking, I was like, oh, finally, Data East is getting some good love.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of times where I see, like, I don't want to say game consoles, but especially during the big mini boom, a lot of like third-party companies, like I want to say Retrobit.
Yes, Retrobit was one. They did some Data East stuff.
Yeah, there was like, hey, here's a bunch of games from Data East, and I would be like, all right, I recognize maybe 1 or 2 of these games, not a whole lot of other stuff, but the fact that there's a Data East game that's so, I would say it's like you gotta have a little bit of continues. It's a fun platformer because I would agree when you say side-scrolling mascot platformer, it's either a Sonic clone or oh god, it's Bubsy. I was actually wondering, it's like, oh, are you about to drop Bubsy on here? Is Todd the
Mm-mm.
top loader, a friend of the show, gonna be like super excited right now? Is he gonna pop go? Is he gonna pop and go, Bubsy, Bubsy, where?
Oh, Toppy, he knew he would. You know he would.
Oh, I know exactly. And next thing you know, Sid Spacey's gonna be like, back, back.
Right?
Uh, both of those guys were on the show, have been guests on the show, and every time I see them going back and forth on Twitter, is always fun to watch.
Oh yeah, I've been on Spacey's show before. Where we've both been on an episode, and it's like, man,
Mhm.
Toppy, he's just unlimited energy. But
Yeah,
hey, just all in good fun, right? But
yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. Data East is one of those companies that, like, I talked about this the other day on stream. I was like, Data East tries to get they try to put their footprint on basically anything that they possibly can, whether it's like a standalone console, games that you could buy on like a virtual console in that sort of sense, games that you can get on Switch Online. They just dropped Side Pocket on the Super NES on Switch
they
Online.
did.
It's like
They did.
there's all kinds of different, like, if there's a console out there, you can bet your bottom dollar there's a Data East game on it. But this is the one that a lot of people miss. I mean,
Mhm.
and I think the other one on the Genesis that for Data East that immediately comes to mind is Mega Turrican. And Mega Turrican is a wonderful game, but I feel people know about Mega Turrican at this point because people know about Turrican between it and Super Turrican, but nobody really talks about High Seas Havoc. And like this is another really great one, but it's one that, like, as a kid, I saw it, but I missed it. And I thought when I did play it, like going into say like my college years, however, I did finally get a chance to play it. I was like, oh, no, this is neat. But then I decided to play it randomly last year on Twitch, and I was just like, "This game's awesome! I mean, it is absolutely awesome." So,
Don't
yeah, get it.
Don't you just love it when you're sitting down, you're playing a game that you played as a kid? You're like, "Oh yeah, this is fun. I like this." And then you revisit it as an adult. You're like, "Yo, this game is actually really freaking good."
Yep, another one from Data East. And like when I grabbed my stack, I almost I was like, "Oh dang, I should have grabbed that," because we were talking about the Genesis Mini too, right?
Mhm.
The other game that and sort of my wife heard me yell because I was like, "Oh my god!" With Atomic Runner. When that got
Oh,
announced for it, that's another Data East like game that's on the Genesis. That's just awesome. It's Chelnov, the semi-sequel to Karnov.
okay.
And yeah, Atomic Runner, it's again, it's kind of like an auto side-scrolling platformer, but it's a mixture of like an auto-scrolling platformer that's also a shmup. And
Mhm.
oh my goodness, it's amazing.
Ooh,
It became one of my favorite Genesis games. Like, it's
okay.
freaking awesome. But it's on the mini, so it's like, okay, I guess some people probably know about it. It'll probably show up on Switch Online. It's Data East. It'll probably
Yeah.
show up on Switch Online at some point. I hope so. But yeah, High Seas Havoc though. I mean, going into that boom. I mean, unfortunately, when many people think about mascot platformers back in the day that aren't Sonic on the Genesis, it's like, oh, what other ones do you know of? Oh, it only comes down to Bubsy, Awesome Possum. Like, it come down to
Oh
stuff like
yeah.
that. But High Seas Havoc gets missed, and yeah, check
You
it
know
out.
what? Nintendo, more love for High Seas Havoc. Put that on Genesis NSO. We play. I play it.
Hmm.
Put that the one mascot platformer that isn't horrible.
Right.
I mean, not to say that the other
I mean,
mascot
that's a lot of
platform.
good ones, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one
Not
though, especially.
well, yeah, not I mean, that was probably a little bit too harsh. Not to say that they're horrible, but once again, you have Bubsy has a reputation, unfortunately. And then you have other games where the only other big mascot platform that I could think of, I want to say it was on the Genesis, but it was also on Super Nintendo, was Cool Spot, which was the 7-Up
Oh yeah.
marketing game.
Oh, I like Cool
And
Spot.
I I've heard not so I mean, I heard it was either okay to just kind of bad, not like not horrible, but I've heard like middling things about it.
I like it a lot personally. It's just hard. I think that's
Okay.
probably one of the things that kind of throws people off on is that it's a tough game. Now,
Yeah.
granted, I think the Super NES version, I think the Super NES version plays a little bit differently. I don't
Mhm.
think it plays as good, if I remember well. But and it does have that weird Virgin Games like camera snapback where, like, you turn to the left and the camera pans this way, you turn to the right, camera pans that way.
Yeah.
So it does
Yeah.
have that weird sort of effect, which, by the way, the Aladdin update that we talk about fixes that. There's no more of that.
Oh,
So
thank
they got
God.
rid of it. Like, thank you. That changes the game. But
Oh,
I like Cool Spot though.
okay. All right. So we've gone through three of your Genesis recommendations already. I'm
Mhm.
kind of trying to mentally put bets on what 4 and 5 are,
Oh, I don't
but
think you're gonna guess one of them.
probably not. Now, when you because my going back to earlier, like I was saying, when I was a kid, it was Sonic on Sega. I didn't care about anything else. I would get games for like I got this the Sega Smash Pack for my Dreamcast, which had the original Sonic the Hedgehog on it, had Shining Force, had a bunch of classic Genesis games on it. And then Sega Smash Back 2, I got that for the PC because that was the only way I could play Sonic the Hedgehog 2. That was like one of my favorite Sonic games besides Sonic CD was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Love that game. And then there's like some other stuff on there. I was like trying to play through Vector Man 2, all this other stuff. So I'm trying to think, but at the same time, it's like all those games that I've played in the past have been on other compilations and other collections. So they're probably not going to be there. But I'm still very curious and I want to know.
All right. So I'll move on to the next one. So I talked about this one on my YouTube channel before, but I wanted to bring this one up again. So it's another side scroller, but this one is a lot more of a darker vibe. Remember how I said about Sega wanted to go for like the adult audience. They wanted to do something that's a little bit different. So in this case, it went a little bit more of a horror aspect, and they put this out. Ever heard of Mystic Defender? Ever heard of this one? This is another really good one. This was an early release for the system. This one came out in '89. Okay. So this one actually is a really, really early release on this one, but it's a side-scrolling platformer. Well, it's not a platformer per se. It's more of an adventure style game. It's basically Japanese horror, where like there's essentially like a princess has been kidnapped, and you have to scale the tower in order to save her, so to speak. It's based off an anime. The anime is called Kujaku-O Spirit Warrior Peacock King. It's actually based off an anime. Of course, because of licensing, they had to change everything for the US release. But and then you get your multiple different types of magic. Like you have your tri-shot, you have your fire magic, you have a screen clearing magic, you have a dragon magic. But it's just but again, going back to the vibe. I remember playing this game when I was a kid, and I remember renting it and looking at it, it's like, oh, this looks kind of cool. So like I rented it and it scared me. Because literally, like the dark vibe and the horror vibe, especially there's one stage that looks like it's something straight out of Aliens, like some H.R. Geiger stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is just, again, it's just something like I had never seen anything like it, like for its time. I think this was really kind of my first take of something that wasn't super cartoony and super inviting, or something that looks like more going back to something like El Viento that actually had like that more warm anime kind of vibe. This one's a lot more dark. It's a lot more gothic. And it's a lot of fun. This is another one that's a lot of fun. It's another challenging one, but once you get it, like it's fantastic. Now, the fun thing about this one is there's a nice little bonus fact about Mystic Defender that some copies of this game, if you look for it, there's a revision, kind of like the Revenge of Shinobi, right? How like the Revenge of Shinobi, when it first came out, they had a whole bunch of bosses that are based off of other IPs. Like there's one based off the Terminator, there's one based off of Batman, there's one based off of Godzilla. Like there were ones like that, but they had to go back and clean them up because, they didn't want to get sued. Right. Although Spider-Man, they got the license to later on. So Spider-Man had that cross promotion because Sega made their own Spider-Man game. So they had that cross promotion with that. But Mystic Defender, what's about this one is that the final boss, when you do get a chance to find the princess and to go save her, she's engulfed by this giant mound of an enemy that you have to take out without killing her. Granted, you can't kill her, but the whole concept is, don't shoot her. But once you free her, you'll notice, like in some versions, in the Japanese version, I believe all the Japanese versions have the same thing, but in the American version, Sega forgot to do something. She's actually naked underneath the mound of enemies, and they forgot to cover her up. Like in some versions of this game, later versions they do cover her up, but I was like, oh wow, really? So they completely missed that. But no, this is a great game though. Great soundtrack, great music, and a lot of people missed on it.
And you said this game came out in 1989.
89, yep.
I am surprised that there was no outrage by parents finding out that there was a naked woman at the end of the game.
I think it flew under the radar so much that people missed it.
You know what?
I think that's really what it was.
Because you did say the game was challenging. And a lot, especially with a lot of platformers or a lot of games like early 90s, very late 80s, like with the Genesis coming out, NES, and eventually Super Nintendo, especially because I was born in 90s, so I was very young. I wasn't good at video games per se. So there would be many times when I would get to a certain part of the game, like Super Mario World. I get to the Lost Woods, could beat the Lost Woods because I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Oh, that took me a while to get past that, even last year.
Even Sonic CD for the longest time. Metallic Madness Act 2. I hate that level. Despise that level. That level was the bane of my existence for God knows how many years. Over 25 years later, when I finally beat it, and I beat that game on this damn thing, my phone, and I was like, finally, redemption. But I could see that being a game like that being challenging. You have to like really put in the hours. You have to really, to quote a bunch of Soulsborne players, get good at the game. So I could definitely see that flying on the radar as opposed to something like, I don't know, Mortal Kombat where you put in the blood code and there's blood and guts everywhere.
Right.
Because Lord knows, especially back during that time of gaming, you still had to be really careful of what games you brought into the home, depending on who your parents were and depending on
Yep.
how unfortunately the stereotype at the time was Bible thumping they were.
Right. And then the interesting thing too is that there's actually a lot, and honestly, you know what? That's actually not a bad idea for a video. There's a lot of games that flew under the radar on the Genesis that were either violent or had some other subject matters that came out before Mortal Kombat. It's like Mortal Kombat was the one, in Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. Those are really like the 1-2 punch that that really spurred the ESRB, really spurred the whole video game violence controversy, like all of that stuff. But there's quite a few games on the Genesis that a lot of people missed out, like Death Duel, where basically it's like you versus monsters and you're basically blowing them apart bit by bit. Like you blow off their arms, you blow off their heads, and there's blood literally like everywhere. Or like, Slaughter Sport, where you basically get eaten by like a shark again. It's like with the blood and everything too. Like there's a Storm Lord where there's literal like fairy boobs and like naked fairies kind of. I'm like, okay, how did all these games get away with this? Or even like the Immortal. The Immortal, one of the more infamous games on the system, where you literally like can cast a spell on like a goblin and their head just like goes explodes and bits everywhere. I'm like, this is all before Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So
because especially back in the 90s, so many parents who were like, oh, video games, they're trying to control what their kids watched and played. They're being good parents, but at the same time, you get like with Mortal Kombat, like when I was reading the Console War by Blake J. Harris, and of course Mortal Kombat and Night Trap came up, and then when I finally watched footage from Night Trap, all the stuff that these Congress what was his name? Larry, I don't want to say Larry Biederman, but that one congressman from Indiana
yes,
who was like very like against all the way he was talking, looking at the archival footage, he was like against almost all video games and saying, oh, you're killing these young women. And I'm just looking at the footage from Night Trap. I'm like, they're not biting. It's just a collar around the neck, and you could see like juices. There's like nothing.
It's very slight. It's very slight. Well, that's the funny thing about Night Trap. That's the interesting thing about Night Trap. Now, if you notice, when the game got re-released, I guess because theoretically, as far as I'm not mistaken, because my wife and I talk about this, I think we brought this up, that whenever you have a game that's been released and it's already been rated by the ESRB, if you release another game later on, you do not have to go for another ESRB re-rating. You can keep the same re-rating. If that is true, Night Trap went out of their way to get re-rated, because the funny thing is that, going back to what you're saying, Night Trap is tame. I think the main reason why Night Trap got what it was because it was live action. It was not cartoon. It was not animated sprites. It was not anything like that. It's because it was live action. Even though you don't see a single drop of blood in that game, you don't see any nudity, you don't see anything. And the game it's tame. Like especially for today's standards. Even back then, I feel it's kind of tame. No adult language, no anything like that. So, but it was purely for the fact that it was live action. That's the main reason. The game has a teen rating now. Like back then it was mature, but if you go and you look at the re-releases on Switch and everything, which I love that too. But yeah, teen rating, just like what was his name? Howard something. I forgot. Howard Lincoln. Thank you. Howard Lincoln is like, Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo console ever. Night Trap appears on Switch. Like,
I cannot tell you.
I mean, that the real on that though is just that the congressmen and whatnot, they were doing their things, but whenever Nintendo and Sega got involved in that whole debate, it was really just a pissing contest between those two. It really was.
It really was.
But it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, but going back to Mystic Defender though, because again, like there aren't very many games that came around like that. I mean, really the only other game that to kind of take that concept and then become a super strong franchise out of it around that same time was Namco's Splatterhouse. Like that was probably the other one. Like that, because Splatterhouse came out. Wait, well, when did I'm not sure when Splatterhouse 1 came out, but I know Splatterhouse 2, which was a Genesis exclusive, that came out later on. And so I think games like Mystic Defender kind of paved the path for that different sort of take. That not everything has to be cartoony. You can go a little bit dark with this and just still be like an awesome game. And yeah, Mystic Defender it's one of those. I highly recommend checking it out. And what's interesting is that if you have a game console, like, so one of the game consoles that I use most of the time, like when I play on original hardware. But I also have, in fact, it's right here. I can show it to you. I have one of these. This is the Analog Mega SG.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah.
I love this thing. It's worth every penny. If you're a Genesis fan, get it. I love it. But it also has a region selector. And what's cool about Mystic Defender is that if you have a region selector, I think all carts are like this. Like if you take the cartridge, and you pop it in an analog or whatever console that actually allows you to change the region, and you change it to Japanese, you'll notice everything changes. You see the logo is in Japanese, the text is in Japanese, the cutscenes look a little different. The main character has their original outfit because they changed Joe's outfit. And it's a lot less more of a priest, like a Japanese priest looking style, or a monk or a shaman. Like it looks a lot less like this and more like on, I don't know, like a Power Rangers kind of look to it, I guess. Even though this is 3 Power Rangers. Yeah. But you can tell they modified it to be more appealing for an American audience. So I thought that was kind of cool when somebody told me that. It was like, hey, change the region to Japan, see what happens. And so I did it. Like, oh, interesting. So the Japanese version is actually hidden in there. Granted, if going back to what I was saying before about the cover up, if it was cover up, it's still covered up. But so they did go out of their way to do that. Wow. But yeah, this is one that like I feel not a lot of people talk about, and it's good. It's really good.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I know there's a certain time where you have to get out, so we're creeping up.
Oh yeah.
So all right, so we have one final game to talk about. So what is the last hidden gem?
Ooh, so the last one that I wanted to talk about, that people, I swear, when I show people this one, they're like, really? Like, no, seriously. So again, going into games at a particular time, licensed games, and you think of the name Acclaim or LJN, and you're like, most people are like, it's like most of their games are terrible, and rightfully so. Not all of them. I'm not of the mindset that all LJN games suck. I'm not on that mindset at all. There's some dang good ones. This is one of them, because it's like technically Acclaim, Arena, Flying Edge, LJN, they're all the same company. They're basically all the same company. But this one hit me really, really hard. And it's so much fun. This is Predator 2. So Predator 2 on the Genesis. This game is so good. It's so good because it's an isometric shoot 'em up. Essentially, is what it is, and you gotta basically free all the hostages before the Predator gets to them, and then beat the boss at the end, survive, kill the Predator at the end, escape the ship, everything. And then, but the thing is that it's so simple, but yet it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying, but you're up against the clock. So like you're basically up against the clock. So whenever if you take too long, you'll see the little, the 3 Predator dots. You'll see the 3 Predator dots like on the screen, and you'll see them slowly creeping up to the hostages. And if you don't save them in time, then he'll get the hostages. I think if you have, depending on what difficulty level you're on, I think it's between anywhere from 3 to 5. 3 to 5 hostages die, it's game over instantly. Like your game is done. And there are no continues. You get a password, but there's no continues. But it's so much fun, and the music is outstanding. Matt Furness did the soundtrack for it, and like it's a lot of fun. But going back to the whole like violence thing, right? So this is another thing that scared the heck out of me as a kid, because I mean, if you've seen the Predator movies, the Predator movies are violent. You've seen what he does to like the hostages and whatnot. It happens in the game too. If you wait too long for the Predator to get to the hostage, you see them, their guts literally fly over the screen. You see arms, intestines, eyes like flying through the screen. And then if you save all the hostages, you have to get to the end of the stage. You see the Predator on the side of the screen. You hear the Predator at the side of the screen. And then you see those dots coming after you. And he's coming up really quickly. And if you take too long, he gets you and you're dead. And that scared the crap out of me as a kid. But it's just that level of tension. My only downside that I have about this game is that it's kind of short. You'll beat it fairly quickly. But other than that, like this is another one that just goes completely under the radar because, it's a licensed game on the 16-bit era. And I get it, because like most of them are not good. Like I totally get it. But there are some diamonds in the rough. Alien 3 is another good example too. But I feel like Alien 3 gets its cred Predator 2 does not get its cred. And I'm just like, man, this is one that I highly, highly recommend checking out. This is also another one going back to El Viento. This is another one that, like, once I start playing, I have to finish it. Like, I have to finish it.
It's easily one of those moments where it's just like, oh, I'll play like a few levels. 4 hours later, oh, is that the sun?
Yeah. It's like, come on, man. But no, it's this game's a blast. Now, this is also another one. There is a Master System version as well. And it's completely different. The Master System version is a side scroller. So like it's a side scroller in the sense of where like you're still moving on that isometric plane, but it auto scrolls to the side as you're going. You still have to save the hostages. You still have to like get the extra drugs, drug squad. You still have to get like the extra drugs to get the points. So I mean, you're not using them. You're confiscating them because you're going up against drug lords. That's sort
confiscating
of them. Yeah, right. But man,
I use big air quotes for that one. But yeah, I completely get this. I'm trying to, because I haven't seen all of Predator 2. I've seen parts of Predator 2, but I do know Predator 2 is like, it's this weird outlier where it's like 1992 Los Angeles, but it's like a different alternate universe 92 Los Angeles, but then in the later movies, it's not 92 Los Angeles. It's weird. Predator 2 is weird.
Right. But this one kind of stands tall in the majority of licensed games that are out there. Another one I could say that I think people kind of skip over that I really like was Demolition Man. Demolition Man is another one that, like, I think that's a great one. Also acclaimed. It's like, I think that's a great one that people miss out on. But I think Predator 2 is probably one of the most criminally missed games on the Genesis. Like, if you like shooters, this is one I love dearly. It's one of my. It's actually, I'm working on a video about like my 20. I'm doing the worst right now, but I'm doing the best, like my 20 favorite Genesis games, the top 20 best. I'll let you in a little bit of secret. Predator 2's on that list because I was like, it's that dang good.
Would you say Would you say that Predator 2 for the SEGA Genesis could be one of the very first games, and the argument of the game was actually better than the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you get those. You'll get those like very periodically. I think probably it's not retro, but whenever people say like, what's a game that was better than the movie? And yeah, Predator 2 comes to mind. I can think like the other one that immediately comes to mind is X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like that's another one that immediately comes to mind. Like this is probably the best example of a game that just far outshines the movie.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Especially with licensed games, because like you said, 16-bit licensed games, a lot of them aren't that good, especially later on the generations, like with the PlayStation 2 or even the PS3 and Xbox 360 era. A licensed game or a game based off a movie, they're not good. Some of them are passable. Like I remember one year we rented Shrek 2 from Blockbuster, and my brother and I marathoned that game. We actually beat it in one weekend, surprisingly enough, because it was co-op and it was actually a lot of fun. But when you hear a lot of games, it's like, oh, it's like Iron Man the game or Man of Steel the game. You hear all these movies, or even I want to say a lot of games, licensed games, especially from the 16-bit era. I would say there's more diamonds than bad stuff because I remember there's this Game Boy Tiny Toons game that I
mean, you don't talk Konami and Tiny Toons. I mean, like they did that franchise good.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what game it was because I only played it on a cart that I still have, but it's a bootleg ROM cart that I bought in Singapore when I got my Game Boy Color. And the whole game is Japanese. I have no idea what they're saying, but I just know it's Tiny Toons, and I had a blast playing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Buster's Hidden Treasure on the Genesis is also another one that's like, oh, so good. Yeah, so good.
Like, and even you were talking about earlier, Mickey and the Castle of Illusion. I was so surprised to see Castle of Illusion and even Mickey and Donald Duck in the sequel to Castle of Illusion.
World of Illusion.
Yeah, World of Illusion. Thank you. On the Genesis Mini 1.
Yeah, that was a shock.
Normally licensed games, especially Disney licensed games, they don't show up on compilations like that. They're off doing their own thing, or they're in their own compilation, like the Disney Afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those games, like, yeah, we've seen there's cartoon games, but they're actually pretty good. Like, I haven't played DuckTales yet. I have DuckTales remastered for my PS3, and I would love to play the original 8-bit one sometime. But everyone keeps talking about how good DuckTales is.
DuckTales is good. It's not my favorite of the Capcom Disney games. That would be Darkwing Duck. But Darkwing Duck on NES is wonderful. But DuckTales is great. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, Capcom and Konami, like whenever they had licensed games, like you knew you were in for a good time.
Oh yeah,
Like
definitely.
you absolutely knew that they would. But yeah, and even Sega themselves, like when it came to licensed games, weren't always like on point. Like Batman Returns on the Genesis, not good. It's like, but Batman and Robin was very good. So it's like sometimes you get like those hits and those misses.
Yeah.
But then you'll get like ones that are based off of movies like Predator 2 that wind up being one of my favorite games on the console. And then at the same time, you get stuff like Wayne's World. Ugh. So
I love the movie. I've heard nothing but horrible things about that video game.
The game. Oh, the game. Oh, it's one of those cases where like the NES version is actually better than the 16-bit version, and that's not saying much.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's that bad.
Yeah, I completely understand. I completely get it. I mean, LJN does have a soft spot in my heart because when I got my NES, the games I got with it, I had a few LJN titles. Nothing movie title related. I had like TNC surf and skating board designs. You know, the surfing and skateboarding.
TNC surf designs. Oh yeah.
Yep, I had that one or have that one. Major League Baseball, I have that one too. And I want to say it came with Wheel of Fortune, but I sold that one years ago because I don't really care about playing Wheel of Fortune on my
people want to dog LJN. And again, rightfully so. But when we're going into that generation, I always tell people this. I'm just like, yeah, it's popular to dog LJN. But here's the thing. I see your LJN. Can I raise you a THQ?
Oh,
can I raise you a High Tech Expressions? Can I raise you these two companies? Because arguably they put out way worse stuff than LJN. High Tech Expression put out the excellent Tom and Jerry NES game. That's their high point. Everything else is just no. No, especially THQ. No.
THQ, that I have a very odd relationship with THQ. Not to say that all the games I have for them were bad, but I remember seeing the THQ logo and oh god, my parents bought me Rugrats in Paris for the PS1 one year for Christmas, and I would only play one certain level, and it was Chucky Chan just because they played the song.
Well, I was going to say THQ came up from the muck in the 32-bit era. Like when you saw the THQ logo on the PS1, then it was like, okay, now you're on to something. But like in the 8 and 16-bit, no. But however, THQ also published in America arguably one of my favorite PS1 games, Ghost in the Shell. So like they published that. So like there is that. But yeah, in the 16-bit there, no. Home Alone is probably just
Now that's definitely one of those movie games where I will run far away from. Let's like when people whenever the debate comes up, like when it's like Nintendo needs to put all the Super Nintendo games on the NSO, or they need to put all these like X, Y, and Z games up on the NSO. It's like no, they don't, because don't get me wrong. Super Nintendo, Genesis, they have libraries of amazing titles. That is not disputed. But I don't want to scroll to play Home Alone from the Super Nintendo or Home Improvement from Super Nintendo. Why do you want that? Just why?
I actually own Home Improvement on Super NES. I actually own that game purely because I wanted the meme. That's oh man. We were supposed to get Home Improvement on the Genesis. It got canceled. We were actually supposed to get it, but that's the one that got canceled. Yeah. It's one of those curiosities. So I still hope that maybe someday a prototype of it will pop up or something. If it even got that far, who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. But
they're supposed to get an Indiana Jones on the Genesis too. That didn't happen. Well, I'm sorry, Indiana Jones's Greatest Adventures. We were supposed to get a port of that on Genesis. That never happened. Like we got the Star Wars one, but a prototype for that came out. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. But anyway, but yeah, Predator 2 though. This is just one that I'm like, man, a lot of people like want to palm it off, but don't. Give it a good shot. And like, I love it personally.
All right. Well, there you go. 5 hidden gems for the SEGA Genesis that you should play. G, we're coming up you're actually a little past time. I'm so sorry. But
it's all good. No worries.
Yeah, but G, thank you again so much for coming on the show and talking Genesis. I would love to have you back and talk even more Genesis someday. That'd be great.
Absolutely. I'm down.
All right. Well, G, where can people find you on the internet?
All right. Well, you can find me on the internet at G to the next level, like welcome to the next level, but with a G like me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at G to the next level. But mostly YouTube. youtube.com/G to the next level. I'm on Twitch 4 days a week, Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays normally. Twitch.tv/G to the next level. You can, so I'm at a couple of conventions. About convention I'm going to be a guest at, Retropalooza Houston. I think by the time that you'll probably drop this video, I might be announcing a couple of other conventions on the East Coast that I'm going to be a part of, including one in August I'm very excited for. And but yeah, that's basically where you can spot me there.
All right. Well, definitely go check him out. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel as well. Base Arcade Pause Menu is part of the Fake Nerd Podcast family of podcasts. We have a billion shows on our channel. So yeah, fakenerdpodcast.com. That's pretty much everywhere you can go. To find everything fake nerd oriented. You can find me on the internet at BenMagnet27, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, as well as writing for Fusion Gamer Magazine, Old School Gamer Magazine. Go to Nintendo.com. You know where to find me. G, thank you again so much for coming on. It has been an absolute blast. And until next time, unpause.